There's a specific kind of quiet that falls over a dinner table right before a family stops pretending to be a family. The candles had burned down to little stubs. Nobody was touching the roast anymore. And my daughter-in-law had just looked me dead in the eye, in front of everybody, and told me a real grandmother would not put a legal document over her own grandbaby. I set my fork down real slow. And I thought, honey, you have no idea who you just said that to. Then I reached into my bag, put my little steno machine down on her good white linen, right there between the wine and the candles. And I said the 6 words I have been saying in courtrooms since 1985. Let us go on the record. My name is Margot Kessler. I'm 68 years old, and for 40 of those years, my whole job was sitting quiet in the corner of a room, writing down every word braver people than me were willing to say out loud. If you're listening from somewhere far away, drop your city in the comments. And please, stay with me until the end. Because what happened at that table did not start at that table. It started 3 weeks earlier, with one text message and a manila envelope I almost tossed in a drawer without ever opening. For 40 years, I made my living as a court reporter. If you've never seen one of us in real life, we're the person sitting off to the side in every courtroom and every deposition, hands moving on a little machine that looks like a typewriter that lost most of its keys. That's a steno machine. It doesn't spell things out one letter at a time the way a keyboard does. You press whole sounds at once. And if you're any good, you can catch every single word a human mouth can make, faster than they can say it. Lawyers talking over each other. A witness coming apart at the seams. A judge running clean out of patience. Somebody crying so hard you can barely make out the words. You catch all of it. You don't add anything. You don't soften anything. You don't fix their grammar to be polite. You take down exactly what was said and nothing that wasn't. That's the whole job. That's the record. There's a word all the young people love now. Receipts. Keep the receipts. They say, so when somebody lies to your face later, you can prove what really happened. Well, honey, I've been keeping receipts since before half of them were born. I just never called it that. I called it the record, and I was very, very good at it. I'm also a notary public. Most of us who work depositions are, because somebody has to swear the witness in before they sit there and lie under oath. So I've got a stamp, a seal in a little logbook. And over the years, I've watched more people scribble their name on a dotted line than I could ever count. And here is the thing I figured out early. Almost nobody reads what they sign. They're too embarrassed to make the whole room wait on them, so they just smile and sign and hope for the best. That little habit has cost people their houses, their savings, their whole lives. I promised myself a long time ago I would never be one of those people. I read every word, twice, sometimes 3 times, just to watch the other person start to sweat. Now here's the part I'm not proud of, and I'm telling you anyway, because otherwise none of the rest of this is going to make sense. I spent my entire career writing down what everybody else had the guts to say. And in my own life, I said almost nothing. 4 decades of other people's truth, on the record, in black and white. My own truth I kept off the record. There was something that happened to me a long time ago, something that got taken right out from under me, and I never said one word about it out loud. Not to a lawyer, not to my own kids, not to a living soul. Hold on to that one. It comes back around. Let me back up and tell you where I come from, so you understand what my boy was really asking me to hand over that night. I got married in 1980. I was 22 and dumb as a post and dead certain I had the whole world figured out. 19 years later, in 1999, my husband decided he'd rather be somewhere else with somebody younger who laughed at all his jokes. And just like that, he was gone. My son Grant was 11. My daughter Nora was 7. And I had a mortgage, 2 kids, and just about nothing else to my name. So I did what you do. I put my head down and I worked. I had already been a court reporter for years by then, since the mid-80s. But one paycheck and 2 children does not stretch far. So after he left, I took every extra job I could get my hands on, scoping other reporters' work, rush transcripts, weekend depositions, anything with a check on the end of it. Late nights at that kitchen table long after Grant and Nora were asleep, hunched over my machine until my hands cramped up and my eyes watered. We ate a lot of store-brand cereal in those years. Generic everything. And not once, not one single time, did I let those two babies see how close we came to losing all of it. That was mine to carry, not theirs. Grant remembers those years a little differently. He remembers a mom who was always working. I've heard him tell it at parties, light and breezy, like it's a punchline. Mom was basically married to that machine. He says it, and everybody laughs. And I laugh right along with them, and I let it slide. I've let a whole lot slide when it comes to my son. If you want the God's honest truth, that right there is my one real weakness. It isn't vanity, and it isn't pride. I just never wanted to be one more person who made that boy's life harder than it already was. Fast forward a few decades. Grant grew up and he did good for himself. Real good, if you go by the highlight reel. He sells enterprise software, whatever in the world that means, and he's slick at it. Every October, he flies off to some company retreat they call President's Club. He lives in one of those neighborhoods with a gate and a guard, where every lawn is trimmed to the exact same height, like a golf course that folks happen to sleep on. Two big SUVs in the driveway, a wife with very good hair, a nursery that cost more than my first 3 cars put together. The young people would call the whole setup a flex. Back in my day, we just called it showing off, and we learned real quick to be suspicious of it. Because here's the thing about my particular line of work. When you spend 40 years listening to people testify about money, under oath, you learn to read a household the way most folks read a face. I can walk into a home and tell you inside of 10 minutes whether these people have money, or whether they just badly need you to believe they do. Those are two completely different animals, and my son, bless his heart, was the second kind. I didn't have his numbers yet, but I knew the smell of it. Lord knows I'd smelled it before, in my own house, a whole lifetime ago. One more thing about me, and then I'll get to that Sunday. I keep everything, every single transcript I have ever produced. I've got a copy of it. File cabinets full of them in the spare room, boxes stacked up in the closet, decades of other people's worst days sorted by date and case number. Nora thinks it's a fire hazard. My friends think I'm a hoarder who's one bad week away from a television show. I happen to think a record isn't worth a thing if you can't put your hands on it the day you actually need it. That dusty little room full of strangers testifying under oath is about to matter more than you could ever guess. But I'm getting ahead of myself. The text came in on a Tuesday. Sunday dinner, Mom. 6 o'clock. It's important. I read it twice, the way I read everything. Because my son does not write it's important. That is simply not how the man operates. Grant calls me when he wants something, and he texts me when he feels a little guilty about wanting it. 40 years of taking down what people say will teach you that the words matter. Sure, but the way a person chooses to say them matters just as much. It's important. Coming from a man who had never once said those words to me in his life, told me absolutely everything and absolutely nothing, all at the very same time. I texted him back that I'd be there. 3 days later, a fat envelope turned up in my mailbox. Thick, heavy, the nice paper. The return address was a law firm downtown, one of those trust and estate outfits with 3 last names in the title and a fountain in the lobby. Somebody had stuck a little note on the front, written in my daughter-in-law's loopy handwriting. Just some estate planning stuff for Silas. Look it over when you get a chance, no rush. Love you. Silas is my grandson. 10 months old, all cheeks and chubby little forearms, and the single best thing son has ever managed to do with his life. So I turned that envelope over in my hands and I thought, well now, isn't that just so thoughtful of them? Planning ahead for the baby. I meant to read it. I want you to hear me say that part. I fully intended to sit down and go through every page the way I go through everything. But I had 2 jobs booked that week, and my knees were acting up. And I set it down on the kitchen counter and forgot about it. And then on Sunday evening, on my way out the door, I slid it into my steno bag without really knowing why I was even bringing it. Some old instinct, I suppose. 40 years of watching people get ambushed in a conference room teaches you to keep your own paperwork close to your chest. I did not open it. Not yet. And that one little decision is the thing that saved me. I didn't even make it on purpose. I drove the 20 minutes over to their side of town with that envelope riding shotgun, through the gate, past the guard who waved me on through without so much as looking up, past all those matching perfect lawns going gold in the October dark. And when I finally pulled up in front of my son's beautiful house, I didn't go in right away. I sat out in my car a minute, the way I always do, and I read that driveway like it was a room I'd been hired to report. 2 big SUVs, both of them leased. I'd have put money on it. A wreath already up on the front door, and it was only October. And then 2 more cars I recognized, neither of which had any business being there for a plain old family supper. One was Nora's little Honda, which meant my girl had driven straight over from a nursing shift to be here, which meant somebody wanted a full house tonight, and parked right behind her. Polished up and gleaming under the porch light, sat a sedan I knew just about as well as my own. That one belonged to Vivian, my daughter-in-law's mother, the other grandmother. Now I thought, sitting there in the dark with both hands still resting on the wheel. Why on God's green earth would you invite both grandmothers and a nurse who works double shifts, all to the same Sunday dinner, and then go out of your way to tell me it's important? Whatever was waiting for me on the other side of that front door, somebody had planned it out very, very carefully. And I was the only soul at that table who didn't yet know what the plan actually was. I got out of the car, tucked that envelope up under my arm, and walked to the front door like a woman without a single suspicion in the world. That is a skill too, by the way. 40 years of sitting stone-faced, while a witness says the most outrageous thing you have ever heard in your life, and you do not so much as blink. You keep your hands moving and your face flat. So I rang the bell with a nice, easy smile and I waited. Sloane opened the door before the chime even finished, which told me she had been watching for my headlights. My daughter-in-law is one of those women who is always, always on. Hair done, lipstick fresh, dressed like she might get called up on a stage at any second. She is 36, and I will give her this. She is genuinely a beautiful girl, in that polished way that costs a whole lot of money to keep up. Margot, she said, and she pulled me into one of those hugs that never actually lands, all shoulders and air, careful not to smudge a thing. So glad you could make it. Come on in, we have got wine breathing. The inside of that house hits you like a wall every time. Ceilings up in the clouds. A kitchen island about the size of a parking space, all one slab of stone. It smelled like rosemary and $40 candles and brand new money, the kind that has not been around long enough to sit still and shut up about itself. And there was Vivian, already parked at that island with a glass of red, holding court like the Queen of England. Vivian is Sloane's mother, the other grandmother. She is 66 and she dresses like she is 66 with an accountant she is trying to impress. She had a scarf on that probably cost more than my car payment, and the second I walked in, she was mid-story about a cruise she and her girlfriends were taking through the Greek islands in the spring. She lifted her glass at me, barely the way you nod at the help. "Margot," she said, "there you are." Then I saw my Nora, tucked back by the counter, still in her nursing scrubs, and everything in my chest went tight. My girl is 34. She works the labor and delivery floor, doubles most weeks, comes home with her feet swollen and her heart full and does it all over again. She is the kind of tired that only good people get. And she was standing there holding a glass of ice water she was not drinking, and when our eyes met, she did the smallest thing. She gave her head one tiny shake, barely a twitch. If you were not her mother, you would have missed it completely. But I am her mother, and I have watched that girl her whole life, and that little shake said one thing loud and clear: Mom, do not. Down the hall, a baby monitor sat glowing on a shelf, and out of it came the softest little sound of my grandson breathing. Silas, 10 months old, dead asleep, placidly out of range of every single thing the grown-ups were about to do in his name. Now here is what nobody in that room understood about me. While Sloane was pouring my wine and Vivian was narrating her cruise, I was doing the thing I always do. I was counting. 2 SUVs out front, both leased. I would bet the house. A pile of unopened mail on the counter, and right on top, a second thick envelope, same heavy paper as the one under my arm, same 3 names from that trust and estate firm downtown. And stuck to the refrigerator under one of those little magnets shaped like a lemon, mostly hidden behind a preschool flyer, was a business card. A real estate agent. Luxury listings. The card said, "Your neighborhood specialist." I read it in about half a second, and I filed it away without letting one muscle in my face move. Because that is the job. You catch it, you keep it, and you do not react. I did not know yet what a realtor had to do with anything. But you do not leave a card like that on the fridge of a house you have got no plans to sell. We sat down to eat. Cloth napkins, the good ones. A roast that cost more than my whole first week of groceries used to. And Grant came sweeping in loud, the way that boy gets when he is nervous, kissing me on the top of the head, telling me I looked great. Mom, you look great. My son is 38, and he is slick, and he was working the table like it was a sales call, because to him it was. Mom, he goes, you would not believe the quarter I am having. Then off he went, this deal and that deal. Some number with more zeros in it than I have ever personally seen, and a trip to Scottsdale for President's Club, which, as far as I can tell, is a company throwing you a party for spending their money to make them more of it. I raised that child on generic cereal and library cards. I know the exact difference between a man who has money and a man who needs the whole room to believe he does. And my boy, God love him, was sweating through a very nice shirt. Dessert came out that nobody had baked. Some kind of tart from a bakery, plated up like a magazine. And Grant set his fork down and squared up his shoulders. And I knew, the way you know a storm is coming by the way the birds go quiet, that we had finally arrived at the actual reason I had been summoned. Mom, he said, we wanted to talk to you about something. All of us. About Silas. About his future. I folded my hands in my lap and I said, I am listening. Daycare is completely insane right now, he said. For an infant, it is like $2,200 a month. We ran the numbers. And Mom, we cannot make it work. We need you to retire early. We need you to be home with him. And there it was, laid right out on that beautiful table between the wine and the candles. The table went dead quiet. Even the monitor seemed to hold its breath. And Lord help me, I laughed. Not a mean laugh. Just a soft, surprised little sound. The kind you make when a child says something earnest and impossible. That is a good one, I said. You cannot afford daycare. On $300,000 a year. Sloane's smile went thin and tight at the corners. It is not about the money, Margot, she said. It is about family. It is about what is best for Silas. And Vivian set down her glass and jumped right in, smooth as you please. A baby should not be raised by strangers, she said, when he has got a perfectly healthy grandmother who could be with him. Could. Such a tiny little word, doing such heavy lifting. You are basically winding down anyway, Grant said, leaning in, doing his best warm eyes. You worked your whole life, Mom. This would be a gift. To all of us. Winding down. I had 2 depositions booked that very week, and I could still catch every word out of a fast-talking lawyer's mouth without breaking a sweat. But sure, baby. Winding down. I looked around at the 4 of them. My son, all hope and hustle. His wife, coiled up like something in the grass. Vivian, righteous as a Sunday sermon. And my Nora, staring down at her plate like it might grow legs and carry her out of that room. And I thought, before I say one word about any of this, I am going to make real sure I understand exactly what is being asked. So I reached for my water, nice and slow, and I said, "All right. Before I answer, help me understand the whole picture." That is when Sloane made her move, and it was faster than I expected, and it told me everything. She had a folder ready, right there beside her chair the entire meal, and I had clocked it and pretended not to. She slid it across the table to me, smooth, practiced, and she set a pen down right on top of it, and she smiled her hostess smile. "It is really just some estate planning," she said, to protect Silas's future. "Grant and I already went over it all with the attorney, so it is good to go. And Margot, this is the best part. You are a notary. You can notarize it yourself, right here, and we save the whole fee. Is that not perfect?" "Perfect." She said perfect. And she looked at me like she had just handed me a present. Now, I want you to understand what 40 years does to a person. My hands did not so much as twitch. I opened that folder the exact same way I have opened 10,000 other documents in 10,000 other rooms, calm and slow. And I started to read, because I read everything, twice. And on the very first page, right there under the fancy letterhead, were the words, "Quit claim deed." And underneath that, the Kessler Family Trust. And the grantor, the person signing away what they own, the person handing it all over, was named plain as day, Marguerite Kessler, me, and clipped right behind it, a second document, a durable power of attorney, Grant and Sloan named as my agents, full authority over my finances, over my decisions, over my life. I read it twice, like I promised myself I always would, and the whole picture came into focus so hard and so fast it was almost funny. This was never about Silas. It was never about daycare, or being home with the baby, or any gift to anybody. They were asking me to sign over my house. The little 3-bedroom I paid off at 62, the house I raised those 2 kids in, on generic cereal alone. Sign it into a trust they controlled, and hand them power of attorney over everything else while I was at it. And the cherry on top, the part that would have made me laugh out loud if it were not aimed at me, was that they had asked me to notarize it, my own dispossession, in my own hand, because here is a little something they clearly never bothered to look up. A notary cannot notarize a document she is a party to. Cannot. It is a conflict of interest, plain and simple, and it makes the whole thing worthless. I have been a notary for over 30 years. Any first year would know that. So either these people had no earthly idea what they were doing, or they knew, and they were counting on me not knowing. And I could not for the life of me decide which one was worse. I closed the folder. I did not sign it. And I looked up at all 4 of them with the flattest, calmest face I own, the one I have worn in courtrooms while grown men lied about the worst things you can imagine. And I said, "I appreciate this. I do. But I have got one rule I have kept for 40 years, and I am not about to break it at my own son's dinner table. I do not put my name or my seal on anything I have not read twice, on my own time, with my own eyes. So, give me a week." The relief that hit that room was almost obscene. Grant exhaled like he had been holding his breath since October. Sloane squeezed his arm. Vivian announced to nobody in particular that she had known all along I would come around, that family always does. And Nora, my Nora, went so still and so pale that I nearly reached across the table and took her hand. I stood up, I gathered my things, and I picked up that folder and slid it right into my bag next to my steno machine. Because I was the grantor and those were my copies to take, and not one of them had the first clue how to tell me otherwise. I told them I loved them. I hugged my grandson's warm little sleeping head one time in the dark, and I walked back out past those 2 leased SUVs, through that gate, into my own paid-for car, in my own paid-for life. I told them I would look it over. I did not tell them I had already started, and I sure did not tell them what I was about to find. I drove home slow that night, with both hands at 10 and 2 like they teach you, and that folder sitting in my bag on the passenger seat like it was something alive. The whole way back through the gate and out into the regular part of the world, where the lawns are all different heights again and the mailboxes lean a little. I kept my face flat and my mind quiet. That is another thing the job gives you. You learn to sit on a thing. You do not let it out until you are good and ready and completely alone. I got home, and I did what they asked. I want you to appreciate that. They told me to look it over, and by God, I looked it over. I have this kitchen table, little round oak thing, water rings all over it, one leg that has been a quarter-inch short since the Clinton administration. And it is the single most important piece of furniture I have ever owned, because that table is where I kept us alive after their father left. 1999, 2000, 2001. Every night after Grant and Nora were asleep, I sat right there with my steno machine and worked. Extra transcripts, overnight rush jobs, anything with a check on the end of it, until my hands cramped up and my eyes burned. That table is where I clawed my way back from nothing. So there was a certain something to the fact that 27 years later, I sat back down at that exact same table, put my reading glasses on, and started reading the paperwork my own son wanted me to sign my house away with. I read it the way I read everything, twice, slow, out loud in my head, one word at a time, the way you have to when it actually matters. Here is what that stack of paper really said, once you scraped off all the fancy lawyer talk. That first document, the quitclaim deed, is about the simplest and most dangerous piece of paper in the whole world. What it does is take everything you own in a piece of property and hand it to somebody else. No questions asked, no money changing hands, no protections, nothing. You sign it. It gets recorded down at the county. And just like that, your house is not your house anymore. People think a home is this big, complicated thing to lose. It is not. It fits on one page. I have watched folks sign it away in the time it takes to order a coffee. And where was my house going? Into something called the Kessler Family Trust. Sounds warm, does it not? Sounds like a Thanksgiving card. But I read the trust documents too, all of them, and the warm part evaporated real quick because the trustees, the people who actually control every single thing inside that trust, were named right there. Grant and Sloan, not me. Once my house went in, they held the keys. They could borrow against it. They could rent it out. They could sell it right out from under me, and I would not have the legal standing to say one word about it. My name would not be on a thing. And then clipped behind all of that, the last little gift, the durable power of attorney. That is the one that got me, if I am being honest. The house was bad. The house made me sick to my stomach, but a durable power of attorney signs away you. It hands another human being the legal right to make your decisions, your money, your medical care, your whole life in somebody else's hands. And the word durable just means it does not go away even if you lose your marbles down the road, which, when you think about it, is the exact moment a person needs to be protected the most. My son and his wife had asked me to hand them my house and my autonomy in the same manila folder, at the same dinner, with the same pen, and then smile and thank them for the tart. I sat there for a long time after I finished reading, longer than I want to admit. And I will tell you something I have not told many people. Sitting at that table with those papers spread out in front of me, I did not just feel angry. I felt something a whole lot older than angry. Because 27 years ago, a different person put a different piece of paper in front of me and told me signing it was the loving thing to do, the family thing to do. And I did not read it, and I signed. And it cost me more than I have ever said out loud to a living soul. I am not going to get into all that just yet. But I want you to know that when I looked at that deed, my hands stayed steady, and something down in my chest did not. I had seen this movie before. I just never let myself watch it to the end. Now, most folks, right about here, would have picked up the phone and started hollering. I did not. Hollering is what you do when you have got feelings and nothing else. I had feelings, sure, but I also had 40 years of a very particular skill, and I was about to use every last bit of it. I did not build a spreadsheet. That is not my language. In my line of work, we do not make spreadsheets. We make a record. So I got out a fresh legal pad, and at the top of the first page, I wrote one word: record. And underneath it, I started laying the whole thing out the way I would lay out testimony. Who said what? On what date? In what exact words? Because here's the thing nobody at that dinner table understood. I did not need a recording of that meal. I am the recording. 40 years of catching every word a human mouth can make had turned my memory into something like a stenotape. I could sit at that table and write down that entire dinner, word for word, in the right order. And I would put it up against a courtroom transcript any day of the week. Sloan saying it is not about the money. Vivian saying a baby should not be raised by strangers. Grant saying you are basically winding down anyway. All of it. On the record now, in my own hand, dated and signed. I worked past midnight. And when I finally turned off the kitchen light and went to bed, I thought I understood the shape of the thing. I thought it was greedy kids and a house grab and a real bad case of keeping up appearances. I did not yet know the half of it. Not even close. The phone started the very next morning, and it did not stop. 7 a.m., a text from Sloan, a photo of Silas in his high chair, oatmeal from ear to ear, the world's most kissable little face. And underneath it, just 3 words. He needs you. 20 minutes later, another one. We are really counting on you for Friday, Margot. Please do not let us down. I did not answer. I have learned over the years that silence is a complete sentence. But I would be lying if I said those pictures of that baby did not land right where she meant them to. By that afternoon, it got bigger than texts. My cousin Marla called me up out of nowhere, and Marla and I talk maybe twice a year, so I knew something was up before she even got to it. Honey, she goes, all careful. Is everything okay with you and Grant? I saw what Sloan put up. What did Sloan put up? I said. Well, turns out my daughter-in-law had gotten on the internet and posted herself a little something. No names. She is not dumb. Just a real pretty photo of Silas and a caption underneath about how some people choose money over family and how heartbreaking it is when it is the very people who are supposed to love your child the most, and how grateful, how just so incredibly grateful she is for the ones who actually show up. And down in the comments, a whole choir of women she has never met, crying face after crying face, telling her to stay strong, telling her that her son is lucky to have a mama who fights for him. Meanwhile, I am sitting at home, the wicked grandmother, the cold old woman who loves her career more than a baby. That right there is a clever little weapon, and I want you to notice how it works, because a lot of you have had it used on you. You do not have to prove one single thing. You just build the stage and point the light and let the whole audience fill in the villain all by themselves. I have watched lawyers do the exact same trick to witnesses for 40 years. Tell me, sir, is it not true that? And it does not matter what comes after. The question already did the damage. Sloan never accused me of anything. She just asked the internet a question, and the internet answered it for her. And here is the part I am the least proud of. I did not fight back. Not then. My whole life. When somebody came at me sideways like that, I just went quiet and swallowed it and told myself keeping the peace was the grown-up thing to do. Off the record. Always off the record. I read Marla's texts and I read Sloane's post, and I felt that old familiar urge to shrink myself down and apologize for something I did not even do. 40 years of writing down other people's courage will do that to you. You get real good at recording a fight and real bad at being in one. But that night, sitting back down at my table, something itched at me that would not quit. Because a person who is truly broke, a person who genuinely cannot afford daycare, does not lease 2 SUVs and fly to Scottsdale and put $40 candles on the table. The numbers were not adding up, and when numbers do not add up in my experience, it is because somebody left something out on purpose. So I went back through that folder, page by page, slow, twice like always, all the way to the back, past the deed and the trust and the power of attorney, to the pages most people never read because their eyes have already glazed over, the attachments, the schedules, the fine print of the fine print, and that is where I found it. Tucked in the very back was a page with a heading on it, Schedule of Existing Family Obligations. It is a thing these trust outfits sometimes staple on, a list of who the family is already sending money to, so the lawyers can account for it all in one place. And there, in a neat little row, plain as anything, was an entry that stopped me cold. Monthly caregiver compensation. Recipient V. Ainsworth. Amount $1,500. And a start date, going back almost exactly 10 months. I read it twice. Then I read it a third time, just to be sure my eyes were not playing tricks. V. Ainsworth. Vivian, the other grandmother. The very same woman who had sat at that dinner table with a scarf worth more than my car and lectured me about how a real grandmother steps up out of love, how it is an honor, how you do not do it for money. And the whole entire time, my son had been wiring her $1,500 a month to watch that baby. For 10 months, since the week Silas came home from the hospital. So the story was never, we cannot afford childcare. There was always money for childcare. They had been paying for childcare this whole time, just not to me. They had been paying the woman who told me straight to my face that family does it for free. I sat back in my chair, in the quiet, at the table where I had rebuilt my whole life once before. And I thought, well now, isn't that just something? They do not have a money problem at all. They have got a completely different kind of problem, and it has got my name and my address written all over it. But I did not have the why yet. I had one ugly fact and a whole lot of instinct. And the why, it turned out, was going to walk through my front door the very next night, still wearing her scrubs, too scared to say it above a whisper. Nora texted me the next afternoon, and it was not like her at all. Mom, are you home tonight? Can I come by after my shift? Just us. 3 little sentences, and every one of them worried me, because my girl does not ask to come by just us. She is a labor and delivery nurse. She works herself to the bone, and then she comes home and takes care of everybody else on top of it. And she does not have a lot of nights left over to be driving across town on her own. I texted her back that of course she could come, and I would put the kettle on. She showed up a little after 9, still in her scrubs, hospital badge still clipped to her chest, her mascara worn down to 2 gray smudges under her eyes. That is the look my Nora gets after a hard shift. And this had been a hard shift stacked on top of something a whole lot harder. I made her a cup of tea and she wrapped both hands around the mug and did not drink a single sip. She just sat at my little table and stared down into it like it might tell her what to do. Mom, she said finally, I need you to know I love my brother. Before I say anything, I need you to hear me say that. I do know it, baby, I said. I have known it your whole life. Something is wrong over there, she said, and her voice went thin. Not just Grant being stressed out. Something is really wrong, and I have been sick about it for weeks, and I do not know who else on this earth I can even tell. Then you tell me, I said, slow, all of it. And she did. A few weeks back, she had been over at Grant and Sloane's, putting Silas down for the night, because that is who my daughter is. She watches that baby for free and calls it a blessing. The nursery door was cracked open, and Sloane was in the next room on the phone. And Nora said it was not a girlfriend voice. It was a business voice. Crisp, careful, the kind you use when money is on the line. She was talking to a realtor. Nora only caught pieces, but she caught enough. Sloane was asking about getting a place ready to list come spring, asking about staging, asking what a 3-bedroom in a certain neighborhood would pull in a month if they rented it out instead. And then Sloane said the thing that dropped my daughter's stomach straight through the floor. She called it my mother-in-law's house. Casual as you please, like it was already hers to sell. Nora looked up at me then, and her eyes were brimming. Mom, she said, that is your house. She was talking about your house. And I kept telling myself I heard it wrong. I have been telling myself that for 3 weeks. But then this whole daycare thing kicked off, and Vivian all of a sudden announced she is done watching Silas. Too tired, she says. And Grant and Sloan are leaning on you this hard, and I cannot make it be a coincidence anymore. I cannot. Please, Mom, whatever they put in front of you, do not sign it. Promise me. I reached across that table and took my daughter's cold hands in both of mine, and I held them. There are moments when a grown child looks at you the exact same way they did at 6 years old when there was something in the closet, asking you to please make the scary thing go away. I could not make this one go away, but I could do the next best thing. I already read it, honey, I said. Every word. Twice. And I am not signing a thing, I promise you. Now I need you to do something for me. Go home, act completely normal, and trust your mother. Can you do that for me? She nodded, and she finally drank her tea, and after a while she went home. And I sat there in the quiet at my table, thinking about a business voice in a room she figured was empty, and one word still rattling around in the back of my skull that would not sit still. Ainsworth. Because when I read that schedule of family obligations and saw V, Ainsworth spelled out in full, something snagged, not Vivian. The last name, Ainsworth. I had heard it somewhere before, in a whole other life, and it was needling me the way a word does when it is sitting right on the tip of your tongue. And I have got a particular kind of memory. 40 years of catching every word a human being can say does something to your brain. Names stick, cases stick. And this one was stuck good. So I did what I do. I went and looked it up. First thing, I pulled up the county court records online, the public ones, the ones anybody can search if they know where to poke around. And I typed in that last name and waited. And there it was. A probate case, filed the better part of 20 years back. Ainsworth versus Ainsworth, family against family. And the second I saw that case number, the whole thing came flooding back because I had been in that room. I had reported it myself. I went into the spare room. Past the file cabinets my daughter swears are going to burn the house down one day. Back to the boxes stacked in the closet, every last one sorted by year the way I have always kept them. And I found the folder, and I pulled my own transcript, the one I typed with my own 2 hands all those years ago. And I sat right down on the floor of that closet under a bare bulb and I read it. My own record, in my own words, exactly the way it happened. Here is what happened. Back then, there was an old woman dying, and she had a house. And one of her daughters, the pushy one, the one who showed up and ran the show, had gotten that old woman to move her house into a family trust, right there at the very end, when she was too sick and too scared and too grateful for anybody who came around to read the fine print for herself. And once that house was in the trust, the pushy daughter held all of it, and the other kids got cut clean out. So they sued. And that pushy daughter sat for a deposition and swore an oath with her hand up, and I took down every word she said. And I read those words again, 20 years later on the floor of my closet, and my blood turned to ice. Because I knew every line of it before I even got there. It was what Mother wanted. I was the one who showed up. Family takes care of family. You would not understand. You were not there. The exact same words. The exact same song. And the name at the top of that deposition. The pushy daughter who took a dying woman's house and looked a courtroom dead in the eye and called it love was Vivian Ainsworth. She did it before. She did it to her own mother. I sat on that closet floor a long, long time because it all clicked at once. And it was so much uglier than a couple of overspent kids grabbing at a house. This was not desperation. This was a recipe. Vivian had run this exact play on her own dying mama 20 years ago and walked away clean because the other kids ran out of money to fight her before she ran out of nerve. And she raised a daughter. And that daughter married my son. And now the two of them were running the same play on me, the same trust, the same fine print, the same pretty words about family and love. and they had my Grant so scared and so buried he could not see. He was the one holding the knife. And Vivian stepping back from watching that baby was not because she was tired. It was because she had a bigger fish on the line now. Me, my house. And to reel me in, she needed me soft and guilty and grateful. So she cleared out of the way and left an empty chair for me to feel obligated to fill. For 40 years, I have sat in a corner and written down what braver people were willing to say. I kept the record and I stayed out of it. That was the deal I cut with myself a long time ago. Stay quiet. Stay useful. Do not make trouble. I closed that transcript. And I got up off the floor. And for the first time in my whole life, I cut myself a different deal. I was done being off the record. A couple days later, I had a job. A deposition downtown. A real nasty one. A family clawing over what their daddy left behind. Everybody lying a little and hating each other a lot. And I sat in the corner with my machine, and I caught every word clean, without missing a beat, the way I have done 10,000 times before. When we broke, a young attorney, sharp as a tack, could not have been 30, came over while I was packing up and said, "Kessler, I have got to tell you, you are the best reporter in this county, and it is not even close. You catch things the rest of us walk right on past." I thanked her, and I drove home thinking about my son telling me I was basically winding down anyway. The woman they wanted to shove into early retirement, the one they figured was too far past it to catch anything, had spent 40 years catching the exact thing everybody else walks right past. And she had very nearly walked right past it in her own family, because when it is your own blood, you do not want to hear the testimony. You want it to be a misunderstanding. You want so bad to just be wrong. There was an old judge I used to work under, years and years ago. Pruitt, meanest, fairest man I ever met in my life. And he told me something once, back when I was green, that I never let go of. He said, "Margot, you know why we keep the record? Not for the folks who can shout the loudest. We keep it for the ones who cannot protect themselves. The ones who need somebody to have written down what really happened so nobody can twist it on them later. That is the whole entire point." I thought about old Judge Pruitt the whole drive home. I thought about a dying woman 20 years ago who had nobody to keep her record. And I thought about my grandson, 10 months old, asleep in a house full of grown people doing arithmetic with his name. And by the time I pulled into my own driveway, I knew exactly what I was going to do. There was going to be one more dinner. I was sure of it. And this time, I was going to be ready. This time, I was bringing the record. Grant called me 2 nights before that second dinner, and he called me alone. I could tell right off. No Sloan murmuring in the background, no baby fussing, none of it. Just my son, and a quiet house, and a voice I had not heard come out of him in a real long time. "Hey, Mom," he said. And that was about all it took. Because I know that voice. That is the exact voice he had at 11 years old, standing in my bedroom doorway at 2 in the morning after his daddy walked out, swearing up and down he was not scared when every other inch of him was nothing but. 38 years old, closing deals with 6 zeros in them, flying off to Scottsdale for a trophy. And there it was again, plain as day. My baby boy, scared in the dark. "Hi, honey," I said. He was quiet a minute, and then it just came pouring out of him, all in a rush, like a dam giving way. "Mom, I am drowning. I am so far underwater I cannot even see up anymore. The house, the cars, the deposit on the preschool, all of it. And every single month it is a knife fight just to keep the lights on. Sloan handles all our money. Mom, she always has. And I just see the panic. I never see the actual numbers. Maybe I never wanted to look. And I sat there with the phone against my ear, and my heart just cracked right down the middle. Because for 1 second, I forgot all about the deed and the trust and that realtor card on the fridge. He was not a con man in that moment. He was my kid. And every cell in my body wanted to fix it for him, the way I have wanted to fix things for that boy his entire life. "So we fix it," I said, real gentle. "But we fix it honest, Grant. You sell the house that is too big for you. You give back one of those trucks. You let your mother sit down with you, and the two of you build a real plan, a true one, and I will stay every weekend if that is what it takes. No, he said. Fast. Too fast. No, Mom, that would look like failing. People would see. And then he took a breath and he said the thing that told me everything. There is an easier way. You retire. You come be with Silas. We get the paperwork squared away, and we keep everything just like it is. Nobody has to know a thing. We get the paperwork squared away. That is how he put it. Squared away. Not sign your house into our trust. Not hand us power of attorney over your whole life. Squared away, like it was a form for the DMV. And I sat there real still, listening the way I have listened for 40 years. And I thought, my Lord, he does not know. Or he half knows, and he has swallowed some soft little version his wife spooned out for him, and he has not read a single page of it himself, because reading it would mean looking at exactly who he has let himself become. My son had not read the fine print either. Same as everybody. Same as I used to be. Come to dinner Sunday, he said. All of us. We will sort it out together. Sunday, I said. Everybody together. That sounds just right. And I hung up the phone and I looked at that folder sitting on my kitchen table. And I thought, you have no idea, son. You want everybody together. So do I. We just do not want it for the same reason. I spent the next 2 days building my record the way I have built 1,000 of them, except this time it was for my own family. And Lord, that is a different kind of heavy. I did not make a spreadsheet. I keep telling you, that is not my language. I made a closing binder, the way the good lawyers do it. Everything in order, everything with a source. Nothing left to my say-so alone. I put the deed in first, and the trust behind it, and the power of attorney behind that. All of it right there in black and white with my name typed on the grantor line. Then that schedule of family obligations, with $1,500 a month wired to V. Ainsworth going back 10 months, plain as a receipt. Then a page in my own hand with everything Nora told me, dated the business voice, the realtor, my mother-in-law's house. And then last, way in the back, the one I did not even want to touch, my own transcript from 20 years gone. Ainsworth versus Ainsworth. A dying woman, a house, and a daughter who called it love under oath. And clipped to the front of all of it, my legal pad, the record of 2 dinners, word for word, dated and ordered, every last thing every one of them had said. I read the whole binder through twice, the way I read everything, and then I set it in my steno bag right next to my machine, and I zipped it up, and I did not sleep much. I want to be honest about that. I have swallowed my own voice for 68 years. Getting ready to finally use it does not feel powerful the night before. It feels like standing at the edge of cold water. Sunday came. I drove the 20 minutes over, through the gate, past the guard, past all those matching gold lawns going dark. And this time when I walked in, they had really gone all out. Candles everywhere. A standing rib roast. Sloan in pearls, playing hostess like it was opening night. And the whole cast was there. Grant hovering by the kitchen, refilling water glasses that did not need refilling, his smile about a size too small for his face. Sloan, poised and certain. Vivian, parked in the best chair like it had her name on a brass plate. And in the corner, my Nora with her husband Cole beside her, quiet as always, his hands staying busy so his eyes did not have to land anywhere. Nora caught my eye across the room and gave me the tiniest nod. I had told her to stay still and let it come. She was holding to that, but barely. They did not even make it to dessert this time. Sloan was too wound up, so she said, setting down her fork with a little click. You have had your week, Margot. You have looked it all over, just like you wanted. And she gave me that thin, bright smile of hers. We really do need an answer tonight. The preschool spot will not hold, and the paperwork is time sensitive. We just need to know that you are with us, that you are family, Grant added, soft not quite looking at me. I I folded my hands in my lap. I have reviewed everything, I said. Real careful. And something in the way I said it made Sloane sit up a little straighter. She had come to this table expecting tears, or guilt, or a grateful old woman finally caving in. What she got was a flat, calm voice and a bag she could not see into, and it rattled her. So she reached for the weapon that had worked on me my whole entire life. The one that has kept women like me quiet and small and scared of being the bad guy since the beginning of time. She said it loud enough for the whole table to hear. You know, a real grandmother would not put a bunch of legal paperwork over her own grandbaby. And the room went quiet. Vivian gave a little satisfied nod. Grant winced, but he did not say a word. They all thought she had just landed the knockout. I let that sentence sit there in the candlelight a good long second. I let it be as ugly as it was. And then I reached down into my bag, and I took out my steno machine, and I set it on Sloane's good white linen, right there between the wine and the burned down candles, where every soul at that table could see it. I have watched a whole lot of people freeze up at the sight of that little machine over the years. It is a funny thing. Folks who will lie to your face all day long get real nervous the second they realize somebody is about to write it all down. You are right, Sloane, I said. Nice and even. Let us not talk about feelings. And I looked around at every one of them. My son, his wife, her mother, my daughter. And I said the 6 words I have been saying in courtrooms since 1985. Let us go on the record. Now hold on. Sloane started, but I was already opening the binder. And once I start reading a record, honey, I do not stop until the record is done. The first thing I did was read them their own words back, because I did not need a spreadsheet to prove they could afford that baby just fine. I had something better. I had them. I turned to my legal pad and I read, dated and word for word, Grant at this very table 3 weeks ago going on about the quarter he was having, that number with all the zeros, the trip to Scottsdale. And then 2 lines down, same night, Sloane saying we simply cannot afford daycare. I read the 2 of them back to back, in their own voices, in the order they said them. 2 SUVs in the driveway, I said. $40 candles on the table. A rib roast tonight that cost more than I used to spend on groceries in a month. And you sat right here and told me there was no money for your son. That is not a family that cannot afford childcare. That is a family that has decided which child ought to pay for it, and picked me. Sloane's face went blotchy. So we like nice things, she said. That is a crime now. Not one bit, I said. Buy whatever you can pay for, baby. But do not slide a folder across your own dinner table and tell me the well is dry. It is not dry. You just decided I ought to be the one to fill it. And then I turned the page, and I got to the folder itself. And this is the part I had been sitting on all week. You told me this was estate planning, I said, to protect Silas. So let me read back what it actually is. And I laid it out plain. No lawyer talk, just the truth of it. That the first page was a quitclaim deed, and a quitclaim deed does exactly one thing. It takes the house a person owns and hands it to somebody else for nothing. That the house going into that trust was mine. The little 3-bedroom I paid off at 62. The one I raised these 2 kids in on generic cereal alone. That the trustees who would control every inch of it were named right there. And it was not me. It was the 2 of you. And that the last page, the durable power of attorney, signed away not my house but me. Every decision I have got left to make in this life, handed over to my own son and his wife. You did not ask me to help with Silas, I said, and I looked right at my boy. You asked me to sign away the house I earned and hand you the keys to my whole life. And then, and this is my favorite part, you asked me, a notary of 32 years, to stamp my own name on it and make it official. My own 2 hands, notarizing myself right out of my own home. The table had gone dead silent. Grant had stopped pretending to breathe. And I want you to know, I was not even close to finished. Because I still had 2 things left in that bag. And the second one had a name on it that one woman at that table had spent 20 years praying nobody would ever read out loud. I turned to the back of the binder. to that schedule of family obligations, and I laid it flat on the table where the candlelight caught it. "There is one more thing I want to read into the record," I said, and then I looked straight at Vivienne, who had been sitting there this whole time with her chin up, like none of this could ever touch her. "Every month for the last 10 months," I said, "$1,500 has left my son's account, and it goes to one person. The line says it plain. Recipient V. Ainsworth. Monthly caregiver compensation." And I set my finger right on it and I said, "Vivienne, that would be you." The color drained clean out of that woman's face. "You sat at this very table 3 weeks ago," I said, "and you looked me in the eye, and you told me a real grandmother steps up out of love, that it is an honor. That family does not do it for money. And the whole entire time, you have been on payroll since the week that baby came home from the hospital. So do not you ever again lecture me about doing it for free. That is private," Vivian sputtered. "That is a family arrangement." "It is a paid arrangement," I said. $1,500 a month. You were paying for childcare this whole time. You just were not paying me. So the story was never that there was no money. There was always money. You people just decided which grandmother gets paid and which one gets asked to sign her house away. And you did not pick the one with the good scarf. And that is when Grant's head came up and his voice cracked right down the middle. "You are paying your mother," he said, staring at his wife. "Sloan, you told me she was helping us out of love. We fought about that preschool deposit for a week. We screamed at each other over $1,500. And you were sending it to your own mom this whole time behind my back. Do not," Sloan snapped. "Do not you dare turn this into me." But I could see it. The whole thing was starting to come apart in her hands, right there at her own pretty table. And she knew it. I let the two of them go at each other for exactly 3 seconds. And then I reached into the very bottom of that binder and I pulled out the last thing, the thing I did not even want to touch. And I laid it down slow, because some pages you set down the way you set down something hot. "I have reported an Ainsworth before," I said. The whole table went still. "20 years ago," I said. "I sat in the corner of a room and I took down a deposition in a case called Ainsworth versus Ainsworth. And I turned my transcript around so it faced them. My own words, typed by my own 2 hands 2 decades back, dated and certified. There was an old woman," I said, "and she was dying, and she had a house. And one of her daughters got her to sign that house into a family trust, right there at the very end, when she was too sick and too scared to read the fine print for herself. And once it was in that trust, that daughter held all of it, and the rest of the family got cut clean out. So they sued. And that daughter sat down under oath, with her hand raised, and I wrote down every single word she said. I looked at Vivienne, and Vivienne could not look back. She said it was what her mother wanted," I said. "She said she was the one who showed up. She said family takes care of family. She said you would not understand. You were not there." And then I set the page down and I said, real quiet, I could have read those lines from memory tonight. "Vivienne," before I ever opened the file. Because I heard every one of them come out of this family 3 weeks ago. Word for word. You did this to your own dying mother. And then you raised a daughter, and your daughter married my son. And now the two of you are running the exact same play on me. Nobody breathed. Nora had both hands pressed over her mouth. Cole was staring at the tablecloth like it might catch fire. And Grant, my Grant, was looking back and forth between his mother-in-law and that transcript with a face like the floor had just opened up under him. "I did not know," he said. His voice was barely there. "Mom, I swear to God, I did not know any of that." Sloan handled the attorney. "She said it was estate planning. She said it was for Silas. I never even read the pages. You never read the pages. I finished for him." "I know, baby. Neither did your father, 27 years ago, and neither did I. And that is exactly how they get you. And that right there is where it happened. The thing I had swallowed for my whole entire life. Because Sloan, cornered, went for the one weapon she had left. She turned on me with tears in her eyes. And they were not sorry tears. They were furious ones. The tears of a woman who got caught and not a woman who is ashamed. You sit there so righteous, she spat at me. So high and mighty with your little machine. You have got no idea what it is like to have nothing, to be scared of losing everything. You have never once in your life known what that feels like. And the whole table waited for me to snap back. I did not snap. I got quiet, quieter than I have ever been in my life. And I heard myself say the thing I have never said out loud to a single living soul. You want to know what I know about having nothing, I said. Let me put it on the record. In 1999, when their father left, I had been a court reporter for 14 years. 14 years of reading every document that crossed my path twice, because that was my job and I was good at it. And that man sat me down with a stack of divorce papers and he said, "Honey, let us keep this clean. Do not lawyer up. Do not make this ugly in front of the kids. Just sign. It is the decent thing to do. It is the family thing to do." And I was so heartbroken and so worn out and so scared of what a fight would do to my two babies down the hall that I did the one thing I had spent my whole career telling other people never to do. I signed it without reading it. My voice did not shake. I made sure of that. And buried in that stack, I said, was a page that signed away my share of his pension. Half of it was mine by law. And I gave it away because a man I loved told me signing was the loving thing, the family thing, and I did not read the fine print. I watched him retire comfortable on money that was half mine, while I picked up every extra shift I could get at that table right there, so my kids could eat. And I never said one word about it. For 27 years. Not to a lawyer. Not to my children. Not to anybody. Because the one thing I was supposed to be good at in this whole world, I failed at, the second it was my own heart on the line. So do not tell me I do not know what it is to have nothing, Sloan. I have spent 40 years writing down everybody else's truth in black and white, and I kept my own locked in a drawer out of pure shame. That is why I read everything twice now. Every word. That is why I did not sign your folder. Because I already know exactly what it costs to be a woman who trusts the people she loves and does not read the page. The room was so quiet, I could hear the monitor humming down the hall. Then I closed the binder, and I gave them my answer, the whole thing, with sources. I am not retiring, I said. I have got work I love and people who need me to keep doing it, and I am the best in this county at it, no matter what my son thinks I am winding down from. I am not signing that deed, and I am not signing that power of attorney. And here is the part you all forgot to check. I am the grantor, without my signature, that trust is a stack of paper and nothing more. My house stays my house. And grant that transcript is on the record now, and so is everything else. So whatever the two of them tell you from here on out, you go read the pages yourself first. Every time. For the rest of your life. I stood up, and I did not sweep any glasses off the table, and I did not make a scene. Because I have watched enough real courtrooms to know the truth lands harder when you say it flat and then you go quiet. I put my steno machine back in my bag. I walked down that hall in the dark, and I leaned over the crib, and I kissed my grandson's warm little head one time, breathing him in, because he is the one person in that house who never did a single thing wrong. And then I walked back out past those two leased SUVs, through that gate, into my own paid-for car, in my own paid-for life. But this time, for the first time in 68 years, I had said it, all of it, out loud, on the record, that trust died right there on the table, just like I told them it would. Without my signature, there was nothing to sign. And my house was still my house the next morning when I woke up in it. The rest of it came apart the way these things do. Grant finally sat down with the accounts his wife had run alone for years, and he looked, really looked, for the first time, and what he found was worse than he wanted it to be. The $1,500 a month to Vivian stopped almost overnight. Funny how fast that family arrangement ended the second it cost more in shame than it saved in cash. By spring, their big house was on the market, listed by the very realtor whose card had been stuck to their own fridge. They bought something smaller 2 towns over, 3 bedrooms, no gated driveway with room for one car, because one of those leases went back where it came from. Grant and Sloan are in counseling now. I hope it helps them. I am not paying for it. Vivian does not call me anymore, and I have found I do not mind that one bit. My Nora, who was brave enough to sit at my table in her scrubs and say the thing out loud when nobody else would, she and I are closer than we have ever been, and I told her so, which is a thing I would not have known how to do a year ago. I see Silas on Saturdays now. My choice, my joy. We read library books, the cheap kind, the good kind, the same ones I read to his daddy a lifetime ago. I babysit that boy because I flat out adore him, not because anybody put a number on it and slid it across a table. And every so often I think about old Judge Pruitt and the thing he told me when I was green. We do not keep the record for the folks who shout the loudest. We keep it for the ones who cannot protect themselves. It took me 40 years and one very expensive dinner to understand he was talking about me too. Here is what I know now, and then I will let you go. For 40 years, I sat in courtrooms and wrote down what braver people said. I kept the record. I was never in it. I used to think that was wisdom, staying quiet, staying useful, never making trouble. But a record only protects the people willing to speak. So let me leave you with the one thing I learned too late. Love is given with an open hand. It is never something you sign under pressure, or trade for a roof, or owe back because somebody once fed you. If the people who are supposed to love you most ask you to disappear and call it family, you are allowed to read the fine print. And you are allowed, even at 68 years old, to finally say what you think. Out loud, on the record. I did. I only wish I had not waited so long.